So, for those of y'all who weren't here last week, what Mark has decided to do, and I think it's pretty awesome, just so the people who don't get to go to Fuge get to experience a little bit about it, and for the ones that are going, they get a little bit of a prep game. Basically, taking each week leading up to Fuge to talk about what's going to be going on, giving a little bit of background information from the verses. So, where we left off last week, just to kind of give a quick review, is talked about Samuel, who he was, where he came from, and how he got to be who he was, leading all the way up to the choosing of King David because of Saul's fall, and now we're at chapter 18 of 2 Samuel. So if you want to go ahead and turn there. We ended off with where David kills Goliath. And Saul is just really starting to get jealous about David because they come back and the people are all singing that Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his tens of thousands. And what I've got here in verse 8 is Saul is furious and resented this song. They created tens of thousands to David, he complained, but only created me with 1,000. What more can he have but the kingdom? And so Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. Day 2 of Fuge, just reading over it and looking through everything, talks about making a hard decision or doing the right thing even though it's hard for you to do it. And the brunt of that is in chapter 24. I'm not going to try and read 6 chapters of 2 Samuel. We'll be here for a while. But I am going to try and hit some high points and read through some of the big things on it. So with that in mind, as their theme, I want you to hear what the stuff that's going on between Saul and David and Saul's son, Jonathan. For those of you who don't know who Jonathan is, we talked about it a little bit last week. Jonathan is, again, Saul's son, and him and David have just a really close brotherly relationship and puts a bit of a strain on things. So starting in verse 10 in chapter 18, this is just to start things off here. It says, the next day an evil spirit from God took control of Saul, and he began to rave inside the palace. Basically, he's going mad. And then David was playing the harp as usual, but Saul was holding a spear. And he threw it, thinking, I'll pin David to the wall, but David got away from him twice. I just want to stop right there. He got away from him twice. Saul has started to go just stark raving mad. Before, the spirit would come on Saul and David could play his harp and the spirit would disappear. Now it's there and it's staying. And Saul has made his first 2 attempts to try and kill David. But David keeps coming back to Saul. He has a job to do and he's there to do it despite whether Saul's trying to kill him or not. So Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had left Saul. And therefore Saul reassigned David and made him a commander over 1,000 men. David led the troops and continued to be successful in all his activities because the Lord was with him. And when Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. Saul knew that he had messed up. He knew that the Lord had left him and he was not coming back, and he had given his kingdom over to David. And so he was just really afraid of David. After Saul makes David a commander of his armies, Saul goes out and slays 200 Philistines. And the way this all goes about is David is getting ready to marry Saul's daughter. Saul says, I'm going to give you over to my daughter, and I'm going to make it to where the Philistines want to kill you. That way, I don't have to try to kill you. I'm going to put the blood on somebody else's hands. Well, David looks at it and says, being the son-in-law of a king is no small thing. He's being really wise about this. And David just basically backs out of it. Well, eventually, his oldest daughter gets married off to somebody else. But in that time, Saul also tries to talk to his servants to convince David, look, this is why Saul wants you to be his son-in-law. Whispering some good things in his ear, kind of like what he did whenever David got ready to kill Goliath. He heard this one good rumor, hey, my family's not going to have to pay taxes. I get to marry the king's daughter. All these great things are going to happen. He went around and asked a bunch of people about it to make sure it was true before he went out and stood in front of this giant. It came true, or heard that it was true, and went after it. Now it's going after him again. Saul's spreading these rumors about it, and finally David decides, okay, sure, but I have nothing to give him. And that's when Saul says, if you go out and kill 200 Philistines and bring me a trophy from it, or kill 100 Philistines and bring me a trophy from it, you can count it as a dowry for marrying my daughter. The man had to give up something. They had to marry in and give some money to help pay for a wedding and this, that, and the other. David goes out and doesn't kill 100 Philistines. He kills 200 and bring it back for the trophy. Marries his daughter. And then, closing out of chapter 18 and verse 30, every time the Philistine commanders came out to fight, David was more successful than all of Saul's officers. So his name became very famous. I don't have my New King. I'm reading from a Holman Christian Standard Bible tonight. I don't have my New King James with me, but the way the New King James words it is that Saul was wise in everything he did. It's not that he was just successful, it was also because he was wise. God was with him, and he made him successful in everything, but God also gave him wisdom to make the right decisions. You don't be a good army commander just by luck. You've got to know what you're doing. The Lord gave him that knowledge, gave him that wisdom to make the right decisions so he could be successful and he could be famous. And so the people start seeing David really being raised up amongst them. And then we get into chapter 19. Starting off in verse 1 again, Saul ordered his son Jonathan and all of his servants to kill David. But Saul's son Jonathan liked David very much, and so he told him, "My father Saul intends to kill you. Be on your guard in the morning and hide in a secret place and stay there. I'll go out, stand beside my father in the field where you are, and talk to him about you. And when I see what he says, I'll tell you." So Saul tries to get David out of his presence. He tries to make him the commander of an army to see if that will kill him. He tries to give him over to his daughters, and in a way to do that, make him fight the Philistines to see if the Philistines would kill him. None of that worked. And so now he's like, you know what? Fine. All of my servants, I want you to try to kill David. Nobody wants to do it. Especially Jonathan, who is the king's own son. And he goes back and he talks to him, and basically Jonathan convinces Saul to not kill David. It says in verse 6, Saul listened to Jonathan's advice and swore an oath, "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed." So Jonathan summoned David and told him all these words, and then Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he served him as he did before. But it doesn't last very long. Right there after that, in verse 8, when war broke out again, David went out and fought against the Philistines, and he defeated them with such a great force that they fled from him. And an evil spirit from the Lord came on Saul as he was sitting in the palace holding a spear. Sound familiar? David was playing the harp, and Saul tried to pin David to the wall with a spear. As the spear struck the wall, David eluded Saul and escaped, and that night he ran away. That's at least 3 times we know Saul personally tried to kill David, and David said, "All right, 3rd time's out, I'm gone." David runs away, flees, and then he flees to his wife where they're living. His wife says, "No, you don't need to stay here. He knows you're going to come here. You need to leave." And that's exactly what happened. Saul sends agents to David's house. She lets David outside of a window, drops him down the wall, and then she makes it look like David is still sleeping in the bed. Like she puts pillows and goat's hair over the pillow and says, he's sick. He can't come out. Well, finally, Saul's men just break into the house and try to kill him, and then Saul gets mad because he's not there. And I want you to hear what Saul says. This is in verse 17 of chapter 19. Saul asked Michal, "Why did you deceive me like this? You sent my enemy away, and he has escaped." And she answered him, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" Basically saying that David was going to kill her if she didn't let him go. That's how far gone Saul is at this point. His own daughter has to lie to him because she knows that if he's gotten to this point and he catches her, he's probably going to kill her too. He's already tried killing David 3 times. And it doesn't get much better after that. So David fled and escaped and went to Samuel at Ramah and told him everything Saul had done to him. And then he and Samuel left and stayed at Naioth. David flees, goes to Samuel to see, if he could help. He's a prophet of God. Saul then tries to send, for the rest of the chapter, he sends 3 sets of troops against Samuel and David at Naioth. Each time the agents get close to where they're at, they start falling down and prophesying. Samuel is there with a whole bunch of other prophets, and they're all prophesying in the name of God. It says the Holy Spirit was there and amongst them. And every time these troops got anywhere close to them, the Spirit came on them as well, and they fell down and started prophesying. And then finally, down in verse 23, Saul goes to Naioth. And the Spirit of God also came on him, and as he walked along, he prophesied until he entered Naioth at Ramah. And Saul then removed his clothes and also prophesied before Samuel. Going into chapter 20, David flees Naioth, trying to get away from Saul again. Saul is running for his life. He knows that David is running for his life. Saul is constantly trying to kill him. I'll get the name straight here in a minute if y'all just give me a minute. But God is constantly with him. And that's something I want y'all to see here in this next chapter, in chapter 20. It says, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What did I do wrong? How have I sinned against your father so that he wants to take my life?" And then Jonathan says, "No, you won't die. Listen, my father doesn't do anything great or small without telling me. So why would he hide this matter from me? This can't be true." Jonathan apparently hasn't been around very much. I don't know how close these cities are together, but for David to be fleeing from city to city and for Saul to constantly be trying to kill him to the point to where, his own daughter has to lie about it because they try to come to David's house to kill him, Jonathan's just completely clueless, or he's completely in denial at this point. I don't know which. In verse 3, it says, David says, "Your father certainly knows that you have come to look favorably on me." And he says, "Jonathan must not know of this, or else he will be grieved." So David's thinking, your dad cares enough about you that if you found out that he was trying to kill me, that you would just be completely in despair. You'd be depressed. And so David comes up with a plan. Basically, it's the new moon. There's some kind of feast going on. And David, being in the position he's in, is supposed to be sitting right next to Saul. Not a very good place to be if you're David. And so David makes up the story, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem, and I'm going to go there for a sacrifice for my family, and I want you to feed all this information to your dad and just see what he does. If he reacts kindly, then I'm safe. If he doesn't, if he reacts in anger, then you know that he means to kill me. And then Jonathan goes a step further. He goes, "All right, you hide out in this field, and I'll tell him all these things for you. And then whenever I find out, I'll come out here and I'll shoot some arrows out into the field, and I'll have a little boy with me and tell him to go fetch the arrows. And then based off of what I say will depend on whether my dad wants to kill you or you need or not, and you need to flee." So it goes through. At chapter 24, it says, "So David hid in the field," or chapter 20, verse 24. I'm sorry, guys. "So David hid on the field, and at the new moon, the king sat down to eat the meal. He sat at his usual place on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat facing him, and Abner took his place beside Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul did not say anything that day because he thought, something unexpected has happened. He must be ceremonially unclean. Yes, that's it. He is unclean. However, the day after the new moon, the second day, David's place was still empty, and Saul asked his son Jonathan, 'Why didn't Jesse's son come to the meal either yesterday or today?' And Jonathan answered, 'David asked for my permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, "Please let me go because our clan is holding a sacrifice in the town. And my brother has told me to be there. So now, if you are pleased with me, let me go so I can go to my brother." And that's why he didn't come to the king's table. And read Saul's reaction here. "And then Saul became angry with Jonathan and shouted, 'You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Don't I know that you are siding with Jesse's son to your own shame, even to the disgrace of your mother? Every day Jesse's son lives on earth. You and your kingship are not secure. Now send for him and bring him to me. He deserves to die.'" Basically calls him out, saying, "You're no son of mine. You should know by now that every day that David stays alive, you risk not being king. It basically means that Jonathan's life is at risk. And Jonathan doesn't believe it. He knows David. He knows his heart. He doesn't think that David's going to try to kill him. He's just going to, if David becomes king, so be it. It goes back and forth a little bit here. Whenever David meets up with Jonathan, they take an oath before the Lord multiple times. And each time, Jonathan is convinced that, I'm going to be right beside you when you become king. I understand that my dad's not going to be king anymore, but whenever you get there, I'll be right there with you and everything will be okay. But verse 33, then Saul threw his spear at Jonathan to kill him. So he knew that his father was determined to kill David. Saul gets so mad that he tries to kill his own son at this point, because this is how far in paranoia he's gone. David's out to kill me. All these people are conspiring against me. Even my own son is conspiring against me. I can't believe anybody. I'm just going to try to kill him now. Throws a spear at his son. But Jonathan sees what's really going on. He misses, the spear misses, or he moves out of the way, whatever. And then Jonathan goes through with his deal. He goes out, he shoots the arrows, and basically tells David, you need to get as far away from here as you can. Just a quick side note on this. A lot of people, when they're looking for things to nitpick about in the Bible, they look for stuff like this. David, like Mark said last week, was eventually called a man after God's own heart. God's Spirit was on David this whole time. That means he was with it. And David's telling lies. He's not just telling lies, he's also asking his friend Jonathan to tell lies. People are going to nitpick and say, why is such a godly man asking his best friend to lie to his dad and see what happens? It almost cost him his life. But something I want y'all to remember, whenever they start picking and cherry picking here in the Bible, there is one perfect person in the Bible. That's it. That was Jesus Christ. The Bible is a book put together of stories of people's lives for us to learn from what they did good and what they did bad. It doesn't say, no, I want to be like David, so I'm going to go out there and kill a whole bunch of people, and I'm going to start lying and do this, that, and the other. No, that's not what it means. David was a good person. He followed after God, and he did what God told him to do. But even Abraham messed up there at the beginning. There was things that he did wrong. There was things that Noah did wrong. You can go down the line. Every person that walked with God messed up somewhere. And like Mark said last week, everything in the Bible, if you're looking from the Old Testament on, it's pointing to the cross. You can look at there and you can see Jesus in every step of it. The New Testament is pointing back towards the cross, saying that this is the thing that makes the difference. It's not what you did. It's not the law. It's Jesus Christ. It's His death, His sacrifice, and His resurrection. That's what matters. And so David, who had the Spirit of God upon him and was sinning like this, still, to me, should just drive it home all the more that no one is exempt from sin. Absolutely no one. So no one is perfect. And as we see God constantly moving to protect David through all of these things, in spite of it, should drive home that that's how much more that God loves us. Yes, he was walking with David. God can't be around sin, though. If you sin and you die, you can't be with God. And David was sinning, and God still loved him enough to protect him. So look, I know you're not doing right. I'm going to help you through this, and we're going to get this fixed. We're going to establish you, and it's all going to be good. Because David's heart was still to the point where I want to follow God, I want to please Him despite everything, but I want to live too. So that pretty well closes out chapter 20, where David begins his life on the run again. David leaves from the city with nothing other than the clothes on his back. He gets to this place called Nob, and he meets with a priest there, a priest named Ahimelech. Lies to the priest. So again, you see David lying. Because the priest is scared of David. He knows the priest knows what's going on, or he at least knows David's history enough to be scared of him. David's had a very good military career at this point. He's not a guy to be messed around with. But he asked David, what are you doing here? And David comes back and says, the king has sent me on a secret mission, but I have no food and I have no weapons. Can you help me out? The only food they have is some sacrificial showbread that just got moved off the altar, and the only weapons they have is the sword of Goliath, the one that David killed. So David eats the bread, takes the sword, and leaves. And he flees to Gath. Don't forget this little tidbit. It's short and it's sweet and to the point, but it comes back to haunt David later. So David flees to Gath, and the king of Gath, the servants of the king of Gath, see him. They know who he is, and say, "Look, you don't want him in your city." They bring him before the king, and David just starts acting like a madman. He acts like he's gone crazy. The king looks at him and says, "Why did you bring me a madman here? Just send him out of the city and go on with it." He's not worried about him. So David escapes again. He's scared of him because he doesn't know what the king's going to do at this point. And then chapter 22 in 2 Samuel, if you didn't think that Saul was crazy enough yet, the title over chapter 22 here says Saul's increasing paranoia. So it just continually gets worse. Starting in verse 1, so David left Gath and took refuge in the cave of Adullam. When David's brothers and his fathers and his whole family heard, they went down and joined him there. And in addition, every man who was desperate, in debt, or discontented railed around him, and he became their leader. About 400 men were with him. Not going to lie, the first time I read that verse, going through this lesson, I was thinking of Robin Hood this whole time. Saul has gone crazy. People are seeing it, and it's starting to kind of leak out. These people are in debt. They don't like Saul, and so they rally to David, hoping that he's going to be a better king in the long run. And then from there, David went to Mizpah of Moab, where he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me." He's looking out for his family. He knows, all right, Saul's came after me at my own house. He's tried to kill his own son. He's probably going to go after my family next if he can't get me. So I'm going to bring them into this foreign kingdom and ask him to protect them. And then in verse 6, Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and at that time Saul was in Gibeah, sitting under a tamarisk tree at the high place. His spear was in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. And then Saul said to his servants, "Listen, men of Benjamin, is Jesse's son going to give you all the fields and vineyards? Do you think he'll make all you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? That's why all of you have conspired against me. Nobody tells me when my own son makes a covenant with Jesse's son. None of you cares about me or tells me that my son has stirred up my own servant to wait in ambush for me, as in the case today." He's gotten to the point to where he thinks his own son is going to lie in ambush and try to kill him now. And he's whining. He goes around, "Why is nobody telling me any of this stuff that's going on? You all are trying to hide him. You all want me to die. You think David's going to do all these great things for you." And basically, Saul's trying to prove to a point that David can't do a thing. I am your king. I'm the one who can make you commanders. I can give you land, or I can take it away from you. Which one are you picking? That's the point he's trying to get across here. Now, back to when David was at the temple at Nob, there was a man there by the name of Doeg. He was an Edomite, and he was one of Saul's servants. I guess he was just stationed there. But at verse 9, he speaks up. And he calls out the servants there at Nob, saying that, your priest fed him and gave him a sword. So they gave him his head start that he needed for him to survive. Saul says, "All right, send a messenger and call Ahimelech and his whole family here. We're going to have a talk, and we're going to straighten this out." Saul calls them in. Now it says Ahimelech's whole family were priests. Ahimelech was a priest. And Saul just, in verse 13, says, "Why did you and Jesse's son conspire against me? You gave him bread and a sword and inquired of God for him, so he could rise up against me today and wait in ambush, as is the case today. And Ahimelech replied to the king, Who among all your servants is as faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and honored in your house. The priest had no reason to not trust David. So was today the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Basically saying, I've done this a lot. I've prayed for this man a lot. Why are you thinking it's such a big deal now? Please don't let the king make an accusation against your servant or any of my father's household, for your servant didn't have any idea about this. Ahimelech has gotten brought up to speed. He sees what's going on, and he's asking the king for mercy. Look, yes, I fed him. Yes, I gave him a sword. But he's your most trusted servant. He's your own son-in-law. He's a captain of your bodyguard, and his name is honored in your whole household. Why should I have not done it? And then Saul takes the next step forward. He orders his servants to kill all the priests. Just be done with them. But not a one of them wants to do it. It says that his servants wouldn't lift a finger. In verse 17, then the king ordered and guards standing by him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they sided with David, for they knew he was fleeing, but they didn't tell me. But the king's servants would not lift a hand to execute the priests of the Lord. Saul's servants are like, look, all right, you're going way too far. We'll help you chase down David to kind of get you settled back down, but if you're going to go and kill the priests of God, that's too far for us. Back then, with the Israelites, that was a big deal to be a priest. You were completely set aside from the rest of the community. You had your rules and regulations you had to follow in order to stay holy and to offer sacrifices and to offer sacrifices on behalf of sins, whenever they brought the sacrificial lamb for the Passover. These are all things that priests were needed for. So it was no small thing for Saul to say, kill them all, because they sided with David. The man who called out the priest, Doeg, the Edomite, is the only one who raised his hand and said, I'll do it. All the priests are gathered there in front of the king. They don't have anywhere to go. So Doeg goes and kills 85 priests that day. And it says, one son, in verse, I'm sorry, my contacts are messing up. Verse 20. However, one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, escaped. His name was Abiathar, and he fled to David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And I want you to listen to what David says here. Then David said to Abiathar, I knew that Doeg the Edomite was there that day, and that he was sure to report to Saul. I myself am responsible for the lives of everyone in your father's family. I told you it was going to come back to haunt Saul, or not Saul, but haunt David one day. But David didn't back down. He goes, their blood is on my hands. It's my fault your family died. That's part of sin. David lied so he can get his head start. It still comes with a price. It came with the price of 85 lives that day. David wasn't the only one to blame. Saul had no business trying to kill off the priests either. But your sin doesn't affect just you. And that's something I want y'all to remember, because I heard it when I was your age and it didn't really register. My sin doesn't stop at just me. Depending on what it is, it could affect my family. It could affect my friends. If I lie at work, it could affect my job. Just to kind of give you a glimpse into what I'm doing right now at my job, I'm covering all these different projects. And there's one person who everybody is turning to because they know that he's been doing things that are wrong. There's a code of ethics that engineers are supposed to follow by. And he's not doing it. He's trying to push his own agenda. He's trying to do the things he needs to do so he can move up the corporate ladder and he can get the next big paycheck and he can get the next big position. but it's starting to come out. And I don't know how much longer he's going to last because of it. I hope he straightens himself out and is like, okay, we're going to fix this. But everything you do will come with a consequence, good or bad. And it's not going to just affect you. But David asked Abiathar, says, "Stay with me, don't be afraid, for the one who wants to take my life wants to take your life, so you will be safe with me." David knows, look, if he gets to us and he kills me, you're safe. Just stay out of the way. Stay with me, because if you try to flee from me, you're probably going to get killed. David sees God's hand on his life and says, I'm protected, stay with me, and you'll be protected. In chapter 23, there's another city there close to David, starts getting attacked by the Philistines. Before David makes a move, in verse 2 it says, David inquired of the Lord, should I launch an attack against those Philistines? Should I help these people? They're my people, they're Israelites. Should I help them from the Philistines? And the Lord answered David, launch an attack against the Philistines and rescue Keilah. But David's men said to him, look, we're afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces? And then once again David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, go at once to Keilah, for I will hand the Philistines over to you. Just a quick word of wisdom. Whenever you got a decision to make, always pray about it with God. That's the first thing David did. He didn't swell in pride and like, it's my people, I'm going to go save them because God is with me. I know I'm going to make it out all right. No, he went and prayed to God first. Should I do this? When he went and told other people about his plan, they stopped and said, pump your brakes, kid. It's okay to seek godly counsel. We're meant to do that. So don't just pray to God. Do that first. Don't let that be the last thing you do. But the Bible also mentions several times, go seek godly counsel, godly wisdom. Go ask people you trust, who know that pray to God, who stay with God all, and talk with Him and read His Word to see what they have to say as well. It never hurts to get more wisdom on a decision. David took those words and he waited. He said, they've got a point. Let me go back and let me talk to God again and let me get confirmation that this is something I absolutely need to do. He doesn't expect God to change his mind. He just wants confirmation. But verse 4, once again, David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, go at once to Keilah, for I will hand the Philistines over to you. The rest of this chapter, David goes, saves the city, and more people come to him at the end of the day. Because of what he's done, he's something Saul didn't even do. One, he saved his own people. But Saul looks at the opportunity and says, look, he's now trapped himself in a city walled by gates. Basically, it's a fortress. I'm going to go there now and besiege the city until they hand him over to me. Saul is ready to kill more of his own people in order to get to David. David and his men hear about it. David prays. He's like, will these people actually hand me over to Saul? And God says, yeah, they will. It's you or them. They're going to hand you over. And David flees. He gets about another 200 people that go and leave with him. He meets Jonathan again, and they have that renewed covenant saying, despite what happens, I'm going to be right there with you. We'll make it through this one way or the other. And then starting in verse 19, it says, this is called David's narrow escape, what the title it gives it. Basically, David goes into the wilderness. People call David out on it again. Saul's servants tell him, hey, this is where he's at. Go hunt him down and kill him. We're tired of you running around like a madman. And they're running around a mountain, chasing each other. It says in verse 26, Saul went along one side of the mountain, and David and his men went along the other side. Even though David was hurrying to get away from Saul, Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture them. So they're running around a mountainside, chasing each other. It's all steadily gaining on him. But Saul gets a message. Philistines are attacking another city. We need you and your men to come save us. And so Saul breaks off the chase and goes and saves that city. And then you hit chapter 24, and this is where, like I said, the brunt of their message comes from. When Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the wilderness near En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 of Israel's choice men and went to look for David and his men in front of the rocks of the wild goats. So he starts hunting David down again. Saul comes in and says, when Saul came to the sheep pens along the road, a cave was there, and he went in to relieve himself. He went in to use the restroom. All there is to it. And then, but the kicker is David and his 600 men were at the back of the cave. It's a big old cave. And so David's men say, go, look, Saul is there, go kill him. We can end all this right now. And then basically they say, look, this day is the Lord, the one that the Lord told you about. I will hand your enemy over to you so you can do to him whatever you desire. Basically saying, God has put Saul here for you to end this. Go end it. And then David got up and secretly cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He sneaks up on Saul. He doesn't kill him. He just takes a corner of his robe, cuts it off, and then walks back. And this is David's heart. Afterwards, David's conscience bothered him because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He didn't even kill him. He snuck up on him and cut off a piece of his shirt. And Saul never knew it. I can't imagine being in David's in his shoes at this point. Saul tried to kill him 3 times in front of him. Saul sent agents to his house to try to kill him. He's chased him out of town, chased him out of multiple towns, tried to kill his own son, and has tried to kill David every chance he gets. David has heard all of what Saul has done. Saul's killed 85 priests. He was ready to hand the city over to the Philistines and just so he can get David. Why he had a change of heart when he's chasing David around the mountaintop, I don't know. But all these things, David has ran and ran and ran. And his people were there, the same one that he sought counsel from about, should we even go stay in that city? He said, look, God placed Saul here, and go take care of it. He had his chance. But David didn't take it. He knew killing Saul was wrong. The Bible doesn't say it. I have a pretty good idea that David learned from his last little mistake he made. Telling the lie at Nob that cost 85 people their lives. He killed Saul. How many more people would die? It would have caused a huge civil war in Israel. He had 600 men. Who knows how many were still faithful to Saul? And David would have had to fight through all of it in order to establish himself as king. I don't think God would have stayed with David much longer after that. I mean, he didn't stay with Saul when he disobeyed him. Why would he stay with David if David decided to turn tail? But David's own heart grieved him so much that he cut off just a corner of his robe, that he does this. He said to his men, I swear before the Lord, I would never do such a thing to my king, the Lord's anointed. Way back before any of this started, God picked Saul to be king. Now, it says later that he regretted it, but God still picked him out. And David knew that God had chosen him for whatever reason. It says, I will never lift my hand against him, since he is the Lord's anointed. With these words, David persuaded his men, and he did not let them rise up against Saul. So they were mad at David for not doing what they asked him to do. It's like, look, dude, he was right there. We've been running for all this time with you. Why didn't you just end it? I can easily see myself on that side of the fence. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm in the back of a cave. Why didn't you end it? David convinces them. He wins them over because they were ready to go out there and kill David. Or not kill David, kill Saul, because David didn't. And then Saul left the cave and went on his way. So all that happened while Saul was in the cave. After that, David got up and went out of the cave and called to Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed to the ground in homage. David's practically signing off his death warrant at this point. He's like, look, you've been chasing me. I'm going to not just sneak up behind you anymore and try to kill you. I'm going to call you out in broad daylight. I'm going to walk out of the cave. I know you've got all your men there waiting on me. Let you know I'm here, and now I'm going to bow down. David had no way to defend himself. He was completely at Saul's mercy. But even though he was completely at Saul's mercy, he was also totally in God's hands. David had some amazing faith to think that God would protect him through all of that. And he did. It says, David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of the people who say, 'Look, David intends to harm you'? You can see with your own eyes that the Lord handed you over to me today in the cave. Someone advised me to kill you, but I took pity on you and said, I won't lift my hand against my Lord, since he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at the corner of your robe in my hand, for I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. Look and recognize that there is no evil or rebellion in me. I haven't sinned against you, even though you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord take vengeance on you for me, but my hand will never be against you." As the old proverb says, wickedness comes from wicked people. My hand will never be against you. Who has the king of Israel come after? What are you chasing after? A dead dog, a flea? May the Lord be judge and decide between you and me. May he take notice and plead my case and deliver me from you. He's praying to God at the same time he's calling out to Saul. He says, God, you pick between me and him. If you want one of us to die, let one of us die. If he kills me, then I want you to take vengeance on him for me. But I want it to be your decision, God. I haven't done anything wrong against my king. I want you to see that. Then Saul wept aloud. He says, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" Then Saul wept aloud and said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have done what is good to me, even though I did what it was evil to you. You yourself have told me today what good you did for me when the Lord handed me over to you. You didn't kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him go unharmed? May the Lord repay you with good for what you've done for me today. Now I know for certain you will be king, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand. Therefore swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." And so David swore to Saul, and then Saul went back home, and David and his men went up to the stronghold. David didn't go back with Saul, but David has made peace. Saul asked for forgiveness and said, look, if anything else happens, just don't kill my sons and don't kill off the rest of my family. That's all I ask. Leave them alone. They've got nothing to do with it. One of the things that I also want to read to you is over in Matthew chapter 5. Let's see if I can find it. I believe it's Matthew 5 or Matthew 6. Give me just a second, guys. I didn't write it down. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But I know it's Jesus talking. There's one point in Matthew and there's one point in Luke. But what Jesus is teaching here is basically, what good does it do for you to do good to the people who do good to you? If I go out to the people at my job who do nothing but help me, and I help them in return, what good does that make me? That doesn't set me apart. That doesn't show I'm a follower of Christ. It just shows that I'm willing to help those that help me. But if I go that next step and I do good to those who don't do good to me, that sets you apart. That shows that there's something more to you than meets the eye. There's something else in you that gives you that strength. And that's God. It's hard. I have to catch myself on it a lot. Because there's plenty of people at work who do nothing but try to cause trouble. There's plenty of people in my family that do nothing but try to cause trouble. And you'll meet them as you go throughout your whole life. Family, friends, neighbors, you name it. There's going to be people who want nothing but to see trouble in your life or in the lives of others. We're not asked to get vengeance on them, to let them have a piece of their own medicine. We're asked to do good to them. We're asked to forgive them. We're asked to pray for them. So pray about that yourself. This is something I have to work on. Like I said, I struggle with it as well. I'll forget. But if you have that going on in your life right now, if you know there's something going on that's holding you back because somebody has wronged you, pray for them. Pray for yourself that you can forgive them, that you can let this all pass by. We recently watched the movie The Shack, and one of the scenes that I liked in it is near the end. If you don't know much about the movie, man's daughter dies, and he loses all faith in God. You know, God, if you are good, if you are who you say you are, you would not have let her die. And God takes on these personas. He shows it. He meets God. He meets God. He meets Jesus, and he meets the Spirit. You got these three people playing it, and they try to teach him who God really is. But near the end of it, God takes on the role of a man and says, today you need a father. And they start walking down this trail to figure out what's going on. And God's asking him to forgive his daughter's killer. And the man who plays this says, look, you need to forgive him. This is your choice, but you need to forgive him. He finally struggles out the words, I forgive you. But he says, I'm still angry. He goes, you will. Just because you say, I forgive you once, doesn't mean all your anger and all your hurt goes away. He says, you may have to say it 1,000 times before it even starts to feel better. Just because you forgive somebody once doesn't mean it's going to stop there. The devil's going to try and eat at you. Keep saying that you'll forgive that person. Keep going after it and seeking to be that better person. Keep seeking Jesus in all of it. And just to close this out, if you're not a follower of Christ, and this is something that I'm like Mark, I think a lot, if not all of you are. But if you're not, this is something that Jesus does, and all you have to do is ask once. He will forgive you of everything you have done. It doesn't mean you stop sinning there. It doesn't mean that you automatically live a perfect life. There's not a day that Billy Graham, I know, goes by without asking for forgiveness. So there's not a day that we should either. But Jesus will forgive you of everything. He will do good to you when you've done nothing but rebel against him. And if that's something that you haven't done or something you feel like you need, I ask that you come up tonight as the praise band's leading us in our last song. Come up and pray. Come up and talk to me if you need to.